Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה. Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה. Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה. Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה. Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה. Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה. מורשה קהילת יעקב, מורשה קהילת יעקב, מורשה קהילת יעקב, תורה ציווה לנו משה. Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה. Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה. Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה. Torah, 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 ציווה לנו משה.
My home office doubles as the Cutler family music room and gym and guest bedroom. Attempts to lock the door or otherwise block the entrance have either been stymied by craftily thinking children or unrelenting banging. As a result, whether 2.5 years old, 6 or 8.5 years old, someone is walking into my office much of the day, every day. Except for when they are less than fully clothed, and I'm live on Zoom, which initiates its own chain of events, my response usually goes from calm to irritated to angered. You know that Abba is doing work now, right? It doesn't tend to matter. They want what they want, and as soon as they get it, I finagle them out of the room so I can continue making calls to congregants, replying to emails, preparing a class or a sermon, or the myriad other things that fill my day. I imagine for those of you working from home with kids who are also at home, this is not an unfamiliar experience. Rarely do I invite them to pull up the piano stool and see what I'm doing. Rarely do I tell them about the passage in the Torah that I'm working on, or about a challenge that a congregant is facing, and how I as the rabbi and we as the Adath Israel community can help. Rarely. But they should happen more. There's a phrase attributed to the Kotzker Rebbe. If you truly wish your children to study Torah, study it yourself in their presence. They will follow your example. Otherwise, they will not themselves study Torah, but will simply instruct their children to do so. There are many ways of living Jewishly. Certainly, though, one cannot live a complete Jewish life without spending time learning Jewish texts. That learning can be in a class, or going through the Parsha at home, or reading a book on Jewish history or theology. Shavuot, significantly, is called Zman Matan Toratenu, not Zman Kabbalat Toratenu. It is the day that we call the time of the giving of the Torah, and not the time of receiving it. I think the wording, Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of the Torah, suggests an implied onus on the giver. It is the transmitter of Torah who is responsible for its spread, midor lidor, from generation to generation. Most of us outsource our children's Jewish education to teachers, and reasonably so. If you want your child to learn the Torah, you probably should hire someone. However, if you want your child to value Jewish learning, you must learn in his or her presence. Or better yet, learn with your child, or niece, or nephew, or grandchild. Values transmission is not something that be contracted out. I am in the fortunate position that when a child walks into my office, by sharing what I'm doing, I am often teaching my child Torah writ large. That is not the case for most of you. Whatever it is that you do now or you used to do, I hope that you share something of it with your family. I also hope that this Shavuot you make a promise to yourself to learn something with your child, another family member, or friend. Struggle with a Jewish text. Read through a couple Mishnayot from Pirkei Avot. Talk about what the Torah means to you. This Shavuot, have a Jewish conversation and pass forward the gift of Torah that was handed to you by Moses at Sinai. Chag Sameach.
In anticipation of the upcoming holiday of Shavuot, when we'll recall the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, I'd like to share a text with you. It's one that contains an important lesson, especially for us at this time. Let's talk for a moment about one of the themes of Shavuot, that of relationships. And just as we have relationships with each other, with family and friends, so too does our tradition remind us that we have a relationship with God. Though we may not see or touch God in the same way that we would a human being, there is a connection, a bond that exists between us, the Jewish people, and the Almighty, as seen in God's willingness to share God's most important gift, the Torah, with each and every one of us. Yet sometimes relationships are challenging. We seek a bond, a connection, but it doesn't seem to always be there. And that's particularly true now when we can't hug, kiss, or even see someone in person, whether it be a loved one, a friend, even a neighbor. It's just not possible. And even with Zoom or FaceTime, it's just not the same. Yes, we can see and hear the other person, but there's still something that's missing. And it's the same question, the same issue with our relationship with God. How do we connect with the Almighty, with whom we also can't even see? Let me share a text with you that speaks to this idea. It says as follows. It begins with a verse from the book of Deuteronomy, and this is at the most important moment when the people of Israel are about to enter the promised land, and God is now speaking to them about establishing a covenant, a brit, a bond with them for all times. So the verse says in chapter 29, verse 13 of Deuteronomy, "And not only with you have I made this covenant and this oath, but rather the generations that have yet to come were also there at that time," as stated in verse 14, quote, "But with those who are standing here with us today, and with those who are not here with us today." Rabbi Abahu said in the name of Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, why does the verse say first, those who are standing here. And then in the continuation of that verse, it says, and those who are not here, when he doesn't use the word standing here. So again, first he says, why does it say that the covenant is with those who are standing here? And it says also with those who are not here, not using the word standing the second time. The text continues, because all the souls were there, even when their bodies had still not been created. It is for that reason their existence, literally their presence, is not stated here. Because, in other words, text is telling us that the spirits of all the Jewish people were there at that time. Even if they physically weren't there, they were there in spirit. So that's why the word Amad is not there in terms of talking about the future, to remind us that we physically were not there, but we were still going to be connected for that moment and for all eternity. It's the knowledge that there's something that many times we can't touch, see, or feel that connects us to one another. It's the knowledge that the love, the caring, the concern is always there. Even if we can't see the person, we know that that bond is so integral that we can still feel it. Even if we weren't there physically, when God made the covenant with the Jewish people at that pivotal moment before they entered the promised land, we were there in spirit. And God's love is there with us now, as it was with our ancestors. Knowing that gives us hope for the future, just as knowing that if I can't physically see my parents or my children, my friend, or even you in the same way, that connection, that bond, that love, that relationship is always there, now more than ever. And just as it is with each one of us, it is there certainly with God. Chag Sameach.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה.